Fabulous. Welcome everyone who have joined us so far. There might be a few more people joining in a minute, but I will just get us started. My name is Ailsa. If anyone can't see a screen easily, I am a white woman with 2 seconds. I'm a white woman with short brown hair. I'm currently wearing glasses and a purple jumper. My pronouns are she, her, and yes, that's basically. I'm the Public Engagement Officer for the Wellcome Centre for Anti-Infectives Research, and today I am joined by our wonderful guests, Cicely, Amy Jones and Irene Halliburton, who are all going to chat about this new creative corner of campus that we have on our little corner of the university. So I shall just jump in and I shall let Cicely introduce herself. Oh, actually, sorry, 2 seconds. I'm jumping ahead of myself. We have a Mentimeter, which we are running, which is like an interactive platform, so we can get people to answer some questions. So it'd be great if people could log in using this system. You just go to www.menti.com, just on a phone or a different screen at all, and you just enter the code 78844890, and you can answer this question. How much do you relate to art, science and gardens? So this is just kind of get a little bit of a feel for who our audience is at the moment. It would be lovely to find out who we are speaking to. Just sometimes takes a second for people to get logged into the system. Aha, here we go. Science is coming out strong. We've got a bit of a even between art and gardens at the moment, which is quite nice. Which has been fab. You can give people a second to fill that in. That would be wonderful. If you don't have access, we can. Oh, I see. Oh, art's coming out in place now. First place. The gardens is the lower one at the moment, but that's not to be surprised at the moment, because a lot of people tend to be from the kind of science or art background at the moment. Magic. I can think that's everyone at the moment. What do you hear what do you think of when you think of the word science? Can you give us 3 words that you think of when you hear that word? I'll give people a second. It might actually be useful if I tell you a little bit more about the centre, the Wellcome Centre for Anti-Infectives Research. It's a centre, part of the School of Life Sciences at the University of Dundee, that works on drug discovery, and we've got lots of a really active public engagement team, so that's why we're running this event. Boring and complicated and sad. Medicine data experiment, which are really interesting. We ran something recently where we were talking about a word cloud of words about scientists, and we were surprised that mad scientist didn't come out, because that seems to be the kind of, that's the changing of the world at the moment, where we're glad that scientists aren't always seen as the mad scientist. Experiment, unknown and chemical. Wonderful. Innovation, I like it. I'm going to change this one over to give us 3 words that you think of when you hear the word art. And for those who've just joined us, if you have access to a phone, if you log into www.menti.com and you use the code 78844890, you can join us with the interaction. Interesting, yes. Art is very interesting. inspiring, fun, edgy, and calming. I like it. Let's give people a few seconds left. I'm awful. Culture, yes, it's quite often quirky. Perfect. I shall jump into Cicely. Would you like to introduce yourself and who you are in relation to this creative corner of campus?
Hi there, thank you, Ailsa. That was fun. I've never done that before, and really interesting to see everyone's reactions. So I am Cicely Farah. I am a white woman with brown short hair. I'm wearing a green polo neck with a black cardigan that belongs to Amy Jones, and I'm wearing peach coloured lipstick that I put on especially for the talk today. My pronouns are she, her. So I am a curator. I'm based in Dundee. I work at Hospital Field up in Arbroath full time. I'm the programme and communications manager there. My relationship with LifeSpace began as soon as I moved to Scotland. So I moved up to Dundee in 2014 to start working at Duncan of Jordanston as curatorial assistant. I worked between the Cooper Gallery for the majority of my time, and also LifeSpace, providing administrative support on the exhibitions up at LifeSpace. My involvement in the gallery grew the longer I was in Dundee. So in 2017, I started working quite significantly more for LifeSpace. And by the time I left LifeSpace in 2019, I'd curated an exhibition with Athena Swan and with Professor Nkanathka called Disentangle. So it was quite an influential organisation for me to work for, and a lot of people made space for me to develop and grow through working in LifeSpace, which I think you can kind of see in the ethos and history of the gallery. So LifeSpace as a gallery and as a programme begun in 2014. It was I did actually talk to Professor Sarah Cook a bit about the history, just to make sure I was totally clarified on how the gallery came to be. So the sculptures that you see on the side of the Life Sciences building, the Wellcome Centre for I'm going to pull it up because I've just said the wrong name of the building. The Centre for Translational Research. So Elaine's the Translational and Interdisciplinary Research building. So, and Elaine's sculptures represent the 4 scales of life. So the molecular, the organular, the cellular, and tissue. And these are large embossed metal sculptures. So Elaine collaborated with Sir Michael Ferguson, Professor, on creating these sculptures for the new building. And upon creating these sculptures in this art science collaboration, my understanding is that Elaine encouraged that there was a kind of an ongoing legacy and an ongoing space for artists and scientists to collaborate within the University of Dundee. It was something that had happened on many occasions between Duncan of Jordanston and Life Sciences, and I know from my relationship and conversations with many of the artists and scientists in the 2 schools within the university that this was something that had happened on quite a few occasions. So LifeSpace was born on this this idea of artists and scientists who were practicing at different stages in their careers, at kind of who might have been, as you might be having the most kind of a PI within a research project, collaborating with an artist who is at this kind of peak stage of their practice, collaborating on new work. So if we go to the next slide. So the way I thought I would approach this is talk a little bit about some of the exhibitions that happened while I worked there and their influence on me. The vision of the exhibitions in LifeSpace were they were to feature art science collaborations. So these artworks might have been created elsewhere. They might have been created as a result of an artist collaborating with a scientist from School of Life Sciences, or sometimes the James Hutton Institute, or other parts of the university. The exhibitions would feature the artworks, but they would also feature they would be quite often relating to a theme, and that theme would be underpinned by current live research happening within the university. So in every exhibition you would have artworks, you would have a display of research, and alongside that would be objects selected by the artists and scientists involved in the exhibition from the University of Dundee's Museum Services collection. So you might have had a selection of praying mantises, or scientific drawings for teaching from the early 20th century. There were all sorts of illustrious and interesting objects that came out of the collections, which were really exciting to get to know, and it was a way of drawing out those collections for the public. In terms of the exhibitions that really influenced me, the first one was obviously Scales of Life. This exhibition here, so this exhibition, all the exhibitions from 2014 to 2018 were under the vision of Professor Sarah Cook, who was the curator of LifeSpace, and she really came up with that vision of how an exhibition in the gallery would come together. The exhibition you can see here, I know, was very memorable for many people who were in the Life Sciences building. The work was called Palaces and featured children's teeth within the sculpture, and this was by Gina Czarnecki and was part of an exhibition called Material Concerns. Likewise, another exhibition that was very influential for me was Hormonal, which was an exhibition that was put on during Dundee Women's Festival, and was part of Women in Science Festival as well, which looked at hormones. The exhibition featured work by Juliette Bonnevaux, Guerrilla Girls, Mary Magic Sang, and the rumour is it really pissed some people off. I think that there was quite a lot of frustrated feedback from people about that exhibition, which is a shame to hear. And I think speaks to our conversations today. Another very influential show was Daksha Patel's exhibition, Signal, Noise, Imaging, Drawing. And the reason why that inspired me so much was because that brought about a collaboration with a scientist in life sciences, Professor Merital Mukut. So Daksha and Professor Merital Mukut ended up working together quite a few occasions. If we go to the next slide, the Spirit Molecule exhibition by Heather Dewey Hagborg and Philip Andrew Lewis, where we worked with the Botanic Gardens to bring plants into the gallery under glow lamps, all sorts of health and safety things we had to go through to do this. But this was about proposing a plant as a memorial, and it was a kind of like an example of how art can sometimes also provoke and be a bit frictional within a building, I suppose. And every plant in this installation were plants that would still be used within life sciences in terms of the original source material. This exhibition was also just really good fun to put on, because we were back and forth from the Botanic Gardens. We worked a lot with Claire Reaney on the install, who sadly passed away recently. So I have very fond memories of this project. And then the exhibition that I think was most influential for me was called Disentangle, Science in a Gendered World, which was I think really made space for me to develop as a curator, as someone working in the arts, and really to develop within life sciences and Duncan of Jordanstone, and I had support from Professor Inka Nathka on that, Janice Aiken, Ali Floyd, Dr. Amory Cameron, and many people from within the university. I think the thing about LifeSpace was it was a very, and still is, a very much about collaboration, and about, there were so many people supporting each other to realise that galleries, that exhibition. And the knowledge that I've gained from then working within LifeSpace has continued on to then what I do. Another very influential exhibition so was Helen and Kate Story's Neurogenesis exhibition, which I'm so in awe of that work, and also their collaboration and ongoing collaboration as a artist, fashion designer, and scientist, so Helen and Kate. So then that influence has gone on to now working at at Hospital Field. We run a festival every year called Beer and Berries Festival. We have ongoing collaborations with Life Sciences and with the James Hutton Institute. And so much is brought to programming meetings when I can say, oh, you know, that scientist works on this and this person works on this, and should we phone up Ali and ask him what he thinks of this? And that's a really exciting, enduring legacy for me in terms of my knowledge, and a place that really challenged me to think differently about things. And also just to say that LifeSpace, in terms of women, has a very excellent track record of exhibiting. We were predominantly, I'd say we had gender equality, but probably more veered towards women and trans women and non-binary women within our exhibitions and events programme. And some of the projects, one of the really strong impetuses of what Sarah did and what I supported her with was she was often trying to bring together a scientist with an artist to forge an ongoing relationship. So some of those relationships might not have even yet come to fruition, but to make each other aware of each other's research, which is, sorry, the sun has just really hit me in the window, but is something that I found to be a very influential process as well. So I have gone on for a long time with a short introduction, but I hope that gives a bit of an understanding of LifeSpace, but also that my role was very much as a assistant, as a curatorial assistant, and eventually I was curating an exhibition, but it's been a very developmental position for me in that sense.
Magic. Thank you very much, Cicely. I shall jump over to Amy if you would like to give yourself an introduction to who you are.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be able to chat to some wonderful women, so I'm really happy to be a part of this today. So my name is Amy Jones. I am a white woman. I have shoulder-length brown hair, a large fringe, glasses, a black sweatshirt with a zip and a collar. So currently I am the learning producer for young people at V&A Dundee. I'm also a practicing artist in the city. I work across various organisations in a creative learning capacity. Examples are Art Angel, Dundee Contemporary Arts and McManus. A large part of my practice is with Dundee Print Collective. We are based in the DCA, and we formed in 2013 as a direct influence of Impact 8 International Printmaking Conference that was held in Dundee. The collective's principles are to promote printmaking as a creative and collaborative medium of expression, which is inclusive and socially engaging to a wide and broad demographic. DPC encourages and engages both artists and individuals with no formal training, art training, to participate in the collective's projects. Today, Dundee Print Collective has had over 100 active members. It might be more now, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think we're maybe hitting 200 now, but not everyone at once. That would be unrealistic. So we have, I would say, 200 active members. We've exhibited nationally and internationally. Most recent projects have been with Big Family Press at South London Gallery, where we created a self-publishing resource for children and young people to use, and it's still being used now. We also had a commission with Arbroath 2020+1 through Hospital Field, where we made a series of flags in collaboration with high school students, and these were displayed along the High Street in Arbroath for the duration of Arbroath 2020+1. Where are we? So it's through Dundee Print Collective that I became involved with LifeSpace. Over a period of a year, myself and Scott collaborated with a group of scientists from Wellcome Centre for Anti-Infectives Research. This was an incredibly generous project where ourselves and the scientists, Irene being one of them, shared our knowledge and our skills, as well as hosting each other in each other's spaces that we worked. This allowed for Translations, which was the exhibition, to evolve very organically through experimentation using objects from the lab research. They were very generous in sharing with us that we probably understood a very small amount of, but we tried our best. Research, Irene brought certain dyes into the print studio, and so we experimented with very much the tools of their trade through the tools of our trade, which is various printmaking techniques. And it was just this wonderful experimentation that was very organic, and it just evolved naturally, which is very exciting, because we all came together not quite sure what we were going to do, but in actual fact, it turned out there was a lot of overlaps, and it was just really exciting. And so that ended with our exhibition, Translations, which I believe is in a current state of exhibition for however long COVID exists, maybe. I don't think we can get access to it, but it's still up, it's still on show. And this slide has just examples from the exhibition. So yeah, there was all sorts of like laser etching, screen printing. What else did we do? Was there other techniques? Photography, all sorts. We did all sorts. Yeah, so that's me.
Yeah, it's definitely still up there. It's being admired by all our scientists. We do hope to move it somewhere soon, but we just need access to the building to do that properly.
It's had a long life.
It has indeed, longer than most LifeSpace shows do. Irene, I shall jump over to you and let us know who you are.
Okay, so I am Irene Halliburton. I am, well, you can't see that I'm short because I'm sitting down, 50-something woman. I have long, slightly lavender hair, also wearing glasses. I was a scientist in the School of Life Sciences for 22 years. I was there, I existed long before the garden or LifeSpace ever did. I've never been an academic scientist as such. I've always been a bit of a dabbler. Science is a day job. I've always been interested in history, in archaeology, in craft, in creating, never things that I've taken to be a career, because why would you do creative things as a career? Sorry, guys. This is just where I come from. And I've always been very willing to share science. I think because I'm not an academic scientist, I always wanted to be able to explain what I did to the person on the street. I was always keen to tell people what I did, to share our successes, and LifeSpace in particular, and the advent of actually having public engagement professionals in the department gave me an awful lot more opportunity to be able to share our successes and what we do, and opportunities to try and relate the science to things that people understood. LifeSpace has been a fantastic opportunity to be able to do that. You get to, standing around with Amy and Scott in the print workshop. You find, mutual points of reference that help us to understand each other's work. And the garden was became an extension of that. It was an opportunity to reach out to a new sets of audiences. I had this idea from the time that the new building was put up. There's this fantastic shiny building with art on the outside, and the gardens that they put round about them were very unimaginative. We had a big square of grass at the back at the entrance to LifeSpace. So you make an art gallery and make the exterior really quite boring. The other end of the building, they just put some squares in. At the beginning, they hadn't even put in anywhere for people to sit. And to make an outside space next to a building like that and not actually have a space where people can take a few moments to themselves seemed, I don't know, a missed opportunity, I think, is the way that I've always described it. So I actually managed to persuade Mike Ferguson to buy some benches for the front. I was pretty pleased when he took that one on board. But the garden one, for me, had always kind of been a muttering underneath. There was a call for projects for Wellcome Centre money. And people always go, oh, I have got this genius science idea. Let's put this forward. And I thought, well, do you know what? I'm going to, stop talking about it and actually try and do something about this. And yeah, we've got a garden now. I say we, but I'm not there anymore. I still keep a very close eye on it. As you can see today, I'm still involved in it. But yeah, it's gone off into the wild, and Ailsa is kindly looking after it for me. The garden and LifeSpace have made me realise that I think the more creative side of me can become part of what I do as a job. It's almost given me permission to release that side of me again into the wild. But yeah, we'll discuss more of these things later. But that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. I shall stop sharing my screen at the moment. But we have a Q&A open for anyone to start asking questions, and we will be very, very happy to answer all of them for you. But I shall just kind of jump in with my own kind of questions. And the first kind of, because it's Dundee Women's Festival, and we are all for females identifying as women, I would like to ask what it's like to be a woman in your spaces, to just expand on the challenges that you think you face, if it's actually maybe easier to be a woman in your space. But I shall jump to Amy. You've got a very pondering face at the moment.
Thank you.
What is it like for you to be a woman in your artist world?
I've been thinking about this being, I don't know if it's just particular to Dundee. I wouldn't say it's to choose to be an artist is challenging, full stop, regardless of your gender. It is just a tough thing to commit to. But it obviously has a lot of benefits because I'm still doing it. I think in Dundee, I've been very lucky in the time that I've been an artist, because the city is full of incredibly inspiring, powerful women in positions of power who are very generous with their time and their support, and I've been afforded that generosity from them. I'm not sure if that experience would be different in another city, but I think being here has been, choosing to stay in Dundee and being supported to do that has been a great experience, and it's been incredibly meaningful to me. So I'm not sure if I necessarily come up against any challenges because of my gender. I just come up against challenges because of the career I chose.
No, that's absolutely valid. What about yourself, Cicely? In the art curation world, do you think you have come up against any challenges as a female curator?
Well, when you put this question to us the other day, I know we were. I think so. There are many women working in art as arts administrators, artists, organisers, directors, all sorts of positions, and I don't think many challenges are because of being a woman. I think there's the kind of, it's often observed that industries that are female dominated are often lower paid, which I would say is very much the case for the arts. I think that any form of precarity in contracts or that does happen a lot within the arts, within the university, within academic systems. I think that can have a more profound impact on people if they are a woman, but I don't think that is. But I think it can have a very profound impact across the board. Precarity does not breed equality. I think that, but I think, yeah, I've had lots of space. Personally, I've had lots of space opened up for me by women in the arts in Dundee, in Scotland, in the UK. I've got people who I look up to, and I feel like it's bloody hard work. But that thing of making space for people is really important. And I think that as I kind of move along in my career, it's how can I make space also for other people's voices, and to make sure that people who might have larger barriers to access than say I did, how I can make space for people in that sense. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, being spaces to be heard, spaces to try things out and maybe get things wrong, and space to really develop also in your ability to make decisions and to know how to move into maybe more leadership roles and things like that. So, but I think it's really difficult when there's quite strict hierarchical systems, and sometimes it's about kind of saying, right, I'm going to give you a bit more autonomy so you can really work out how to do this as well. But yeah, it's not like it was in the 70s. And I think that if we were working in a very commercial art world, it might be quite different. But I know that even in the last 5 years, it's changed hugely in the commercial art world as well, around artists represented by commercial galleries and things like this. But in this part, in Dundee, in Scotland, I think we're all right in many ways.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you have noticed a difference in the commercial art world in the last kind of 5-10 years. I know that working in life sciences, it's a very kind of typically male-dominated profession. Irene, what would you say about that, having worked as a female researcher in WCAIR or just the wider research world?
I think science has come a really long way. An experience out with science has shown me that it's come a lot further than a lot of other areas have. But I still think there were moments that my contribution felt less valued than male colleagues. Often by male colleagues who were much more academically, again, not being an academic scientist, I think maybe was a bit of an issue. And it was quite frustrating because you knew that you had the same ideas, or, you know, things like that. But I think science is fairly good. Is fairly good. And I think from a salary point of view, I think if you're doing the same, I never felt that I wasn't getting paid the same as a male colleague for doing the same job. There are fewer women in positions of power, But again, I think that is quite slowly changing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's progress is happening. It's just taking its
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I've had a question from the audience actually, kind of linking back to what Cicely said about making space. What do you think that male allies can do and should be doing to make space in, I'll say, the art world? I'll go to Cicely for that. Oh, sorry.
Yep, I've unmuted myself. In the art world specifically.
Yeah.
I guess it's if you are curating, programming artists, diverse backgrounds, if you are involved as a curator and you have women working around you, making space for them to be heard and listened to, and I guess observing. I mean, this is something I do. Does my behaviour change with different people? Maybe that's being very self-reflective, but I think it's and amplifying voices where you think it's necessary, but also sometimes, this is something I think about in terms of my own privileges. There's also like sometimes I think it's right to speak, and other times it's right to not speak. And it's viewing things quite holistically. Like it's not always my time; it's sometimes other people's times as well.
I think self-reflection is good though, and I think once we start to self-reflect and consider others, people do the same thing.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. It's again, it's a time thing. It's a learning from example that people set.
Yeah, I think I do it a lot more now, and I think it's related to the pandemic, because you realise that there's a much more people's feelings about how things have let me think about this. There's been an emotional response in the pandemic that we all have to consider, and everybody's is not the same, and I think that's made certainly me more considerate in normal life. Yeah.
No, I definitely agree that the pandemic has kind of changed people's views on interaction and all that. I've got a question for you, but I'm actually going to semi-pivot it to Amy in a second as well.
Okay.
A question for the audience has been that they would have considered science to be quite creative, and why did you not feel like you thought science was creative, Irene? And I'm going to pivot it to Amy after you've answered it to be, how did you feel working with scientists when you were creating the art with them? If there was any kind of like challenges or specific like that, but I'll jump to Irene first.
I think that particularly as in the branch of science that I was in, I was not there to be creative. I was there to do a fairly restrictive job. I was there to carry out particular tasks, and the scope, there was no scope. There was very, very limited opportunity to do something a bit different.
I think that makes sense. So would you say that the wider world of science can be quite creative?
Oh, I think so. I think it can be intellectually creative. Yeah. If you're a research scientist, like a pure research scientist, you're there to discover things and, find things out. Whereas I was in much more of a technical role. Again, because I'm not an academic scientist, I was not in a particular research role. I was more one of the people who did the work rather than just had the ideas and tested experiments and things. I was there to do a job.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So pivoting to Amy, was there any challenges that you thought, or any surprising moments for you when you were working directly with the scientists, either when you came to visit SLS or when you were working with them in the print studio?
I think the only challenge, or problem, and it was a good problem to have, was that the scale of it was huge.
Yeah.
There's so much to work from, because we were coming in from that creative side, so we were in like asking such basic questions, just like, why are the caps that color? Why are you using that color? Like, it was such an aesthetic response.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and it was the same when everyone came to the print studio as well. It was just the language and the process was very, very similar, in that there was an end goal, there was a something that we were aiming for, but we didn't know how to get there.
Yeah.
So it took experimentation and trial and error, and because I remember, Irene, you were using dyes, and then we discovered like a week later that they faded.
Yes, yeah. So I'd taken in actual dyes that we would use under the microscope, but once we mixed them with the base ink for screen printing, we went from 1 week to the next week, and the colour, they looked beautiful. Colour had almost disappeared. So the dyes weren't light fast.
Yeah. But that was exciting. That was.
It was.
I
Yeah.
remember that moment when you pulled the screen, and we were both like, "Oh, I think we're onto something.
Yeah.
This is so exciting." And then we came back the week after, and it was like, "Oh, it's literally all disappeared."
I must actually have a look and see, because I've still got some of them. I've got some of them here. I should look and see just how much they have faded.
Yeah.
Because we ended up using the same colours, but we had to use actual print inks.
And to fake it.
But to fake it, yeah.
So there were good challenges. It was. I think in the nature of the print collective and the nature of my practice is very collaborative. So it didn't feel any different from working with anybody else, really. It was just quite a natural, evolving experience. Maybe, yeah, I would say so. We'd spent maybe a year figuring everything out, and then all of a sudden it just came together, and it's great.
It was.
Yes.
The work in the LifeSpace Gallery is beautiful, so it did definitely all come together in the end. I'm going to change this. Cicely, you mentioned that the hormone exhibition did piss some people off. We have had a question saying, why did it piss people off? And is it actually a bad thing that it pissed people off?
I think there were two things that pissed people off. One of them, Sarah would be the person to ask more detail about this. I didn't receive this directly. I think it was just I think it was maybe to do with some of so the hormonal exhibition was there was a big Guerrilla Girls piece in there exploring, I guess it's like the different impacts of, it was to do with the drugs relating to hormones, it was to do with HRT, it was to do with the pill, it was to do with the trans experience, it was to do with all sorts of different aspects. And I think there were a few different elements. I think in one element there was a kind of artist provocation about making your own hormonal treatments, and that was seen as being too provocative. I think it was like a kind of DIY at home kind of, maybe, I mean, Irene, you might remember this piece.
I don't remember that particular point being raised.
Okay.
But it also brings in a parallel with some of the problems that we had when we first suggested the garden.
Okay.
Some of the management of care were concerned that we were promoting homeopathy. So that could have been part of the problem, DIY hormone treatment. The thing I remember about the hormone exhibit was the smell.
Oh no, that was the exhibition I did, which is the
was it?
project, yeah.
Oh right, sorry.
That was a different gender exhibition. Yeah. Yeah, that one was applying a scent of a skunk to, it was a Clara SET work, which is, she's done pieces similar that are often quite kind of disrupting of space, but maybe not on a 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, kind of disrupting.
People were slightly concerned that someone was smoking weed in the building.
Yeah.
So
what was the other thing with the hormone exhibit?
I think it was the general concepts and ideas of the show, kind of questions. It was. I think I'll find out from Sarah, and I'll send you the full. I'll find out in particular. I think that it ruffled feathers is what I understood. But for me, I found that show to be incredibly inspiring. So it was, I think the second part of the question was, is there a problem is that bad if it kind of had bad feedback? No, I don't think so at all. I think it provokes discussion, and that is a good thing. And I think that was one of the things we learned a lot about with the LifeSpace program, was also, and I hope that was a kind of a learning experience for everyone who worked with and encountered and visited, was that sometimes the collaborations aren't necessarily collaborations, they might just be conversations. There might be kind of moments of friction. There might be moments where an artist is saying, well, particularly with the spirit molecule work, Heather and Philip were proposing the idea that you could insert the genes of a loved one who's passed away into a plant, and then that plant kind of takes on life, or the historic life of that person, so it's like a memorial plant. But as we learned, well, I think as was very clear, is that's not possible. The genes would have kind of eventually exited the plant, because have been taken to it. But it was more about it being this proposition rather than it being it actually working. And that in itself, that friction, I found really interesting, and I learned quite a lot from that as well in that sense.
I think that's quite a good thing about the LifeSpace Gallery, is that it does pose questions to the research scientists that are working in the building. And that kind of leads me on to a question, which would be, what I'll say to both Amy and Cicely, what do you think as an artist art science can teach research scientists? Irene obviously has experience with this, because having done the translations, but to yourselves personally, what do you think that our research scientists could learn from the art science world? I'll jump to Amy first, because
I don't know. I don't think I would want to presume anything, because it's such an individual experience being creative that I don't think you can predict what you're going to get from it. But I think from my experience of making art, is that you maybe think from a different angle. You look at things from a different angle. That it provokes you to look differently, to read things from a different perspective. And I think in any kind of research, that's a valuable tool to be open to change direction, or put yourself in someone else's shoes, boots, what's the saying? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's what I get from making art. And research is research, regardless of what it is, I suppose. Yeah, I think that's my answer.
Good answer. It's a very, very valid answer. Cicely, what about yourself?
I think when an artist is approaching scientific research, like Amy said, I think they can bring different angles to that research. I think that the process of making art and gathering of ideas and interpreting ideas into artworks, the form doesn't necessarily reflect exactly what the research is. It asks questions, and I think that creative mode of art as, I don't want to say representation, but this thing of the visual language of art will not necessarily translate, but it might translate ideas better than it might translate form in that sense. So I think it can support, it can ask questions of scientists, but also it can ask questions, ethical questions around the research, and help to ask those questions to a broader public and to a broader sphere, in that sense, through the public exhibition. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I've had a question from the audience for you specifically, Amy. Would you consider doing similar projects to translations again? And if so, what kind of things would you change about the current project if you were able to do it again? And also, they've said Happy International Women's Day for Tuesday, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would absolutely do it again. It's so interesting to experience a world that I don't exist in at all. I don't work in science, and to have that introduction, because that's all they could really offer me with my capacity to understand. But it was so good to have these conversations, and they were very kind of like in the moment when we were making together, that it would just evolve very naturally, and it was an amazing experience. But collaborating, I think, is an amazing experience, and I'm not sure if I would do anything different, because each step was necessary to get us to where we got to, and so yeah, I think for a project that was very open-ended, to evolve with a group of committed people who were all kind of just figuring things out together and being really open-minded and trying things out for the first time on each side. It wasn't that we were doing all the teaching. It was very much an exchange. So 2 years later, I would say it was a wonderful experience, and I would change it for the world.
You have to, I'm here.
No, I honestly mean that, because we were speaking before this about it. We were doing a lot of reflection because we were thinking of another life, really.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
It was so valuable, but we were all strangers to each other. We hadn't overlapped at any point. And for us to create an exhibition that was ambitious and successful to our measure was a wonderful experience, and I would do it again.
It was, I think it was very coherent. You couldn't actually tell in the end which pieces were created by artists and which were created by scientists.
Exactly, that's a really good point, actually.
I think there was a big difference in this art science project as compared to others, in that the scientists were actually doing the creating. I think often the artwork comes about with a conversation between a scientist and an artist. And so the visual that is exhibited is maybe not the physical product of what a scientist has done. It's an artist's interpretation, whereas we had both. And I think that makes it different from a lot of other art science projects.
Yeah, we were all artists at the end of it.
Absolutely, and I think I continue to be. I
think there's a few from the group that continue to be.
Yeah.
So I think it's a success.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm still printing.
Yeah.
I'm still in there printing. Yeah.
Wonderful. It does seem like it was like a very two-way conversation.
Definitely.
The whole experience.
Yeah.
We've had a question from the audience for Cicely about what do you have a favourite piece of art that was in LifeSpace whilst you were curating?
As a curator, it's not, well, because I wasn't the person curating the show. So I did curate one show, so I won't select from that exhibition. My favourite, there were two works that I always really loved. one of them was the Spirit Molecule exhibition, which was the chamber with the growth chamber with the plants in the gallery. And I think that was really to do with the relationships formed around the work, but also because I found the proposition so interesting. Also, I actually learned a lot about science as well, and about what is possible in terms of plant genes and human genes. And yeah, that would be my favourite project that I worked on. I really liked some of the pieces in 2014. There was a Helen Chadwick piece, but yeah, there's many. It's hard to choose.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very fair, because there was a lot as well. I've had a question specifically for Irene from the audience that has said, Irene, you are an excellent communicator. Do you have any advice on communicating science to a wider audience?
I think the key to communicating and ensuring understanding with any audience is to make links, is to relate something that they know about to what you're trying to tell them. And that's a really nice segue into the garden, because we haven't talked about that an awful lot. But I think lots of people know about or are aware of plants as medicines, how you are what you eat. People can relate plants to their own health, and I think that's why the garden has turned into such a good communication tool. And I think it's all about finding links between what people know and what you try to tell them about. And I think a lot of scientists maybe even try to over-explain. It's about pitching it. It's about pitching it at the right level. Because, it's seeing the light in someone's eyes when they finally understand a scientific concept is fantastic. And that works at any age, be it, a 5-6-year-old or a 60-70-year-old. It's making connections. Yeah.
I think the garden as a way of letting people in works so well in that way. We at Hospital Field, a lot of our public programme since last year and this year is very much based around the garden at Hospital Field and the history, 800-year history going back to the monastic times of that garden, its medicinal garden history. And Irene actually came and did a talk about at Beer and Berries Festival last year, where we were looking at Hospital Field at medicinal gardens. And what was so nice is also that we were doing workshops around drawing, around foraging, around herbalism, and then we were also doing scientist talks around the garden. So you could really have a breadth of, you could open it up in so many different ways for so many different audiences in order to communicate the ideas in science.
I mean, there are, despite there being a bit of an issue with our management not wanting us to be seen to promote herbalism, there are overlaps. There are plants that herbalists use that we don't know what the active ingredient is. But everything in our garden has an active ingredient that's been identified to have an actual, scientific proven medical use. But most of these were used for hundreds, if not thousands of years before the active ingredient was identified. So they were herbal medicines before they became real science. But that's when men started to get involved, when it became science and not just herbalry. But yeah.
Sadly, we are running out of time, so I'm just going to pose one final question, which links into a question that I was going to ask anyway, that we've got from the audience. And it is, for everyone, how do you see things evolving with your relationships, the garden and the gallery over the next 3 to 5 years? I will jump to Amy first, because you're first on my screen. It's a big question, very philosophical, so take your time, it's all good.
I don't know if I have an answer for that.
That's absolutely fine.
idea. That's exciting, isn't it? I don't think any of us thought that we would be where we are now. So, who knows? I'm open-minded. Is that a cop-out?
Nope, it's the best way forward.
Got to keep your options open.
Yeah, always.
And in this world, can we really plan 3 to 5 years ahead?
Well, exactly.
Cicely, how about yourself?
Where do I see?
Where do you see yourself or the kind of the LifeSpace Gallery in the next 3 to 5 years, just all together? It's a big question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can't think 5 years ahead in that way. I think that I think that the knowledge I've gained from working in LifeSpace around communicating, I learned a lot about communicating, translation of ideas and collaboration. I will learn from continuously. I think that, yeah, and I hope that there are things that projects I work on in future where I can draw on that knowledge and contact scientists that I got to know within that context and artists and draw on those relationships with future commissions and exhibitions and performances and things like this.
Perfect. Irene, how about yourself?
Oh, well, obviously I no longer work for the university, so I'm not directly involved, but LifeSpace and the Garden gave me an opportunity to realise that there was more, that I wasn't just a mediocre scientist, I think. They made me realise that I've got an awful lot more to offer. And I still think that I've still got lots of ideas for exhibits that we could be doing in there. I think obviously the pandemic held us up a little bit, and we would have liked to have launched the Garden with an exhibit in LifeSpace that joined the two up. We'd already planning some artworks to go in the Garden. So we've got some students who are currently creating some works that will sit in the Garden. And I think to weave the two together, I think there's still huge opportunity for that. And at any point, I'm quite happy to come and be involved in that in any capacity at all. I kind of see the Garden as my legacy to the university. And I'm so proud that we actually managed to open it on the day that I left. And I'm happy with all. I've already, with where I work just now, we've been in touch with the public engagement team in the centre, and we're already sort of getting a little bit of a connection in there. So yeah, I'm happy to continue working and see it go from strength to strength.
Perfect. I would love to work with all three of you again. It was always a joy. But I think sadly that is where we're going to have to end today's event.
Okay.
But I think it's been brilliant to talk to all three of you. I could talk for hours. There's so much more. I have so many more questions.
Lots of things, yeah.
But sadly, I think we have come to the end of our allotted time. Thank you everyone that has come along, and you all gave us some really, really brilliant questions. This event is recorded, so I will be posting it on YouTube if you ever want to come back and watch it again. But yep, thank you very much, and enjoy this very sunny Saturday where I am anyway. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much. That was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you everyone.